I'm sure I'll be fine from here on, as I have been before. These were the last words of Kyllikki Saari, a young Finnish girl a few moments before her death. They were spoken to her friend, Maiju, right before she rode her bike to the dark road, which would lead her home. That fateful night of May 17th, 1953, what Maiju didn't know, however, was that she would never see her friend again. Instead, her innocent mind would be tortured, along with that of many others, in what would become one of the most upsetting mysteries in the history of Finland, one that would be gravely remembered for years to come. Throughout the world, unsolved murder cases are not uncommon. In this Nordic country, however, crime rate is one of the lowest in the world. If you would like to know the statistics, it's the 12th lowest to be exact. And of course, it used to be even lower back in the 50s. It is then reasonable that such an awful crime would stain the hearts of the population, especially since the killer was never specified. It shows that even in the most peaceful and kind places of the world, there is always room for insanity and evil. Kyllikki Saari, as was her full name, was born in Finland on December 6, 1935. Kyllikki was a normal girl, religious, social, and she also worked in the parish office of Helsinki. She lived with her parents in a countryside house outside the city near a town called Isojoki. Fast forward to Sunday, May 17, 1953. 17-year-old Kyllikki returned around noon from the church in Isojoki, looking and feeling tired. She was supposed to go there again to attend a Christian youth event in the town that evening. Her parents later reported that she was nervous about going, something unusual for her. She actually told her parents she would like to meet her friends, but was nervous about the way back. In an interview years later, Aino Saari, Kyllikki's father, mentioned among others, once she said that she didn't always dare to go out alone. He later regretted not paying more attention to his daughter's statement. Kyllikki ended up going to the event. She enjoyed it with her friends until its end around 10 p.m. After this, the young girl started cycling home alongside her friend Maiju. They rode together until a crossroad, where they would have to part ways. 3.3 miles, or 6 kilometers of unit. Dirt road separated Kyllikki from her home. It was at this point where she spoke her last words. She tried to sound like everything was fine, but she talked nervously. And there is a hint on why this happy and normal girl had started to be so afraid of being alone in the dark. During the winter, something happened that may have played a part on the change of her behavior. One day, Kyllikki had been skiing in the forest, when something or someone scared her so much that she went off the trail, skied too close to the house, and called her father to pick her up from there. This incident might be a lead on that someone maybe had her in their sights already, and that maybe there was more to that darkness and loneliness that had made her feel nervous that fateful night. It wasn't unusual for Kyllikki to sleep at Maiju's place, as she had been working on the city center. Her parents didn't look for her when she didn't return home that evening, or Monday morning. They became alert when they received a call from the parish office, asking them why their daughter hadn't shown up for work that day. That was very strange. Kyllikki was a punctual lady that wouldn't usually act like this, so the police were called. As it is normal with small towns, news spread fast. Some reports came early. The first from a man who reported cycling past the girl at around 10:40 in the road where she disappeared. 2 more witnesses said that they had seen signs of a struggle on the road on Monday morning, not far from where the man said he last saw Kyllikki for the last time. There were road marks from a car that had made a U-turn, as well as bicycle marks and lots of footprints and shattered glass. Many people volunteered to help with the search, but as time passed by and nothing was found, rumors started to spread. People were judging others without evidence, ruining many innocent reputations in the process, and as the press was eager to publish names of suspects without any critical thought or clues, police's work was made harder as they now had to also decipher which stories were based on truth and which were wild fantasies. The only real evidence that was found was a report about a cream-colored car with 2 men and a bicycle in it, which was never directly linked to the murder. Finally, a lead was achieved when later in July, the 22nd to be exact, the victim's bicycle was discovered by two berry pickers, who saw a tire sticking out of a bog some hundred of meters away from the road. They noticed that the handlebars were twisted and the tires were empty. In order to make it sink easier, the area had been searched before, but the bike simply wasn't there then. This became more evident when a closer examination showed that the saddle was in good condition, meaning that the bike hadn't spent a lot of time in the water. There were no marks on collision, and the fact that it was hidden in this place suggests that whoever hid it there knew the place well. Moreover, there was some rust on the bicycle, something that means that it was only recently thrown in the marsh, and there would be no oxygen there, so rust could spread. The investigators were at first very optimistic after this discovery. However, it took a very long time to find the victim. It was actually October 1953, almost 6 months after the incident, and the investigation would pause to a halt soon, as snow would start to fall, covering all the clues. Ino Sapila, chief of the police, decided to make one last try in the area around the dirt road, where Kyllikki was last seen. On the 10th of October, at 9 a.m., a research mission member discovered Kyllikki's shoe, wrapped in her scarf, as well as a sock of a man. All three were tied with woolen black thread. The scarf had teeth marks on it, suggesting it was used as a gag. The very next day, October 11th, someone noticed a dry pine stick pointing out of a tussock, close to the place where the shoe was found. There were no pines growing in this specific area, so it was very odd that a random stick was just placed there. He pulled out the stick and noticed it was sharp. Right away, the foul stench of decomposition invaded his nostrils. The chief of police was immediately summoned, and after some soil was removed, the rotting corpse of Kyllikki Saari was uncovered. Her head was wrapped in her own coat, and she was naked from the waist down, while her bra was misplaced. Her shallow grave was only 200 meters from the road. Her body was examined by the professor of forensic medicine, Aurinkotuuli. He proclaimed that she was killed by a strike on the head by a blunt object, possibly a stick or stone. He based that assumption on the fact that her nose and cheekbones were broken. Of course, the lack of clothes suggested a sexual crime, but there was no evidence of intercourse. Due to the advanced decomposition, one could not decipher whether she was a virgin or not at the time of her death. She was not pregnant, as some of the early rumors had suggested in May. Previous parties had been dispatched in the area. Again, the bog where the body was found was strikingly close to the road as well as the bike, but had found nothing. This can pretty much conclude that the corpse and the bike were placed later at those sites. It is also noted to be that 2 weeks after Kyllikki's disappearance, wood was planted in the area, but nothing suspicious was noted. Also, the body had already been decomposing when the stick impaled it. It is seriously disturbing to think that for so long, the killer was hiding the dead body in the evidence somewhere around the area, and was probably walking amongst the other residents of the small town of Isoyoki, only to try and bury them near the crime scene, after the investigation had lost its intimacy as he thought. Furthermore, the grave was well constructed, leading the experts to believe that the murderer had some experience in military engineering. The stick was sharpened with a classic Finnish knife, the puukko, by a left-handed person. Nothing more was ever found of her, other than her other shoe. Her watch, red purse, and hymn book were never recovered. Kyllikki Saari's memorial service was finally held on October 25th, 1953, with 25,000 attendants from many different places of Finland to wave her last goodbye. However, everyone's thoughts were clouded by one idea. This was Kyllikki's second burial. Her first one was far more sinister, and with a much smaller audience, that being only one person. These are the possible list of suspects. Koko Voito Kanervo, the vicar of church Kyllikki was attending. He was for a long time the main suspect. In fact, it was revealed that the girl had sent him a letter 3 days before her death, regarding some religious problems she had. He was, however, transferred to a different area 3 weeks before the murder. As claimed by his daughter and maid, he was in Marikarvia, 60 kilometers away from the crime scene, during the time of the murder. What makes things sketchy is that Kanervo was known to have improper relationships with many women during the war, and for one of those, he was expelled from his missionary work in Africa. It was also known that he liked to flirt with young girls. In 2 years after the murder, he was persecuted for being in a relationship with an underage girl, having sex with a minor, as well as engaging to someone while he was already married. The priest denied knowing Kyllikki well, which is odd, considering he was her confirmation priest and the two had exchanged letters. He was also mentioned in the girl's diary. On a side note, the vicar had a relative with a car matching the description of the car found during the investigation. During the rumor spreading in the Isoyoki area, most villagers considered him as the killer. The ex-police officer, a man known for his bad behavior, and the owner of a bar in a close-by area. He was dishonest and generally hated by the locals. He was even fired from the police force for the bad way of his life he was having. The main claim against him is that one of the eyewitnesses reported that it was him in the cream car that night, alongside another man. Again, an alibi was provided, as he was seen with the business owner between 2200 and 0100, far away from Isoyoki. The business owner even told the police that he had later taken the man to his friend's house, where they spent that night. The ex-police officer was arrested twice, but was later cleared completely. Again, the media created extended articles about his sinful life, and the last remnants of his reputation were ruined forever. The ditch digger, a generally nice man who was arrested and released as the police didn't have enough evidence against him. He had, however, committed a sexual crime in the 40s and also suffered from PTSD after the Continuation War. He was also accused by some girls for allegedly peeping on them while they were in the sauna. His alibi, given from his family, was that he was sleeping the night of the murder, and after some heavy drinking sessions. While questioned, he promptly said that Kyllikki was certainly dead and won't be found, which raised suspicions. He later said that the police misunderstood the statement. He was interrogated in the hospital while he was there for psychological evaluation, and the police weren't able to get much as he started to behave disorderly. He and his brother-in-law were suspects as they had a criminal background and lived close to the area and worked nearby. A shovel was found in the dig site where they worked, which could be the one used in Kyllikki's murder. The skillfulness of how the grave was dug could trace back to these two people, who were professional diggers. Brother-in-law moved to Sweden shortly after being questioned. In 2002, police reported that they had strong evidence against the duo, but by that time, both men were long dead. Runar Holstam, the suspect for a later murder in 1959, which was very similar to Kyllikki's. The man was not persecuted, as he was already in prison at that time. The black-bearded man, a very peculiar person, known for his thick black beard. He was allegedly very smart, but after suffering a nervous breakdown, was never the same. He was known of sexually harassing women, as well as peeping on dancing couples from the woods near dance places. According to medical reports, he was castrated at some point in his life, a common practice for the mentally ill people in Finland at the time. Oftentimes, he was seen in Kyllikki's workplace, where he called her his bride. He also showed the same behavior with another girl in public. The night of the murder, there was a dance, but the man was not seen. On the contrary, later at around 2 a.m. that night, he tried to persuade a woman to come down from her house and go out with him. The woman refused and reported that the man was carrying a big bag on his shoulder. The next morning, he tried to attack his legal guardian, but was shot in self-defense. However, he did manage to survive. The speculation was that the man killed Kyllikki and walked around the town with a murder weapon in his bag, and later, he returned to bury her. He was questioned, but no conclusion was reached through his answers, and he was released. He later on died in the mental hospital in 1971. Hans Assmann, a suspect that was reported by his wife. She said that her husband was working in the area the night of the murder. She also mentioned that the man had wet shoes and was missing a sock when he returned home that night. He also had a car fitting the description, which was also damaged. A few days later, he left to somewhere with his driver, this time carrying a shovel. A police inspector visited Assmann on his deathbed in '97. There, he got something, which is perhaps the closest thing to a case closure. Assman reported a car crash that he had been a part of. He didn't mention any names, but said that his driver hit a young girl and they tried to cover the event by making it look like a murder. Here are some possible conclusions. An investigator tried to profile the culprit. He supports that he should have been over 30 years old, with only a few social relationships. He would be the kind of person that peers would call him weird. A crime like this should be planned, and the victim and culprit must know each other. It was a small town after all, so usually all villagers are pretty much acquainted. It is possible, however, that the killer didn't plan the crime that night, and maybe he just happened to find Kyllikki and thought that this would be a good possibility. The fact that he hid the body and the evidence means that he already had criminal background and knew how to set a murder. This case is the most famous of Finland. Maybe it was the innocence of the young girl and the dreadful idea that in this small, friendly village, there could be so many possible culprits and none could be trusted. The media coverage back then made the issue even bigger. Even now, you can find the murder site in Google Maps, and people still visit it. It seems that the macabre and fear attracts us like a strange magnet, and we can't help but listen to the call. On a last note, it is possible that Kyllikki Saari's murderer was in the area, and maybe even helped with the searching and investigation process, as well as participated in her second funeral, as to not raise suspicions, as no suspect was persecuted at the time. Just imagine this poor girl's killer, looking devastated, maybe even crying at the sight of his own work, hiding his true nature from the police, and parents, and all the community who suffered from the loss of their very own Kyllikki.
Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.